Every morning, James arrived at the office at 8:15. He was always clean. Always pressed. His shoes were polished. His shirts were ironed. His hair was neat. He made coffee in the break room and said good morning to whoever came in and asked how people's weekends were with the easy, natural manner of someone who had nothing to hide. He had everything to hide. For 3 years, James did not have a home. Not a house. Not an apartment. Not a room in someone else's place. He slept in his car, in parking structures and quiet side streets, rotating locations so no one called the police. He used the gym 2 blocks from his office to shower. He kept his clothes in a portable garment bag hung from a hook in the back seat. He charged his phone at work. He went to every team lunch. He laughed at the right moments. He contributed to birthday collections and signed the cards that were passed around and once helped a colleague move an apartment's worth of furniture on a Saturday morning. Nobody suspected anything. This is a story about what it costs a person to hold a life together with invisible thread. And about what happens when someone finally sees through it, not because the thread breaks, but because one person looks closely enough to notice it was there all along. James Alderman was 46 years old and a data analyst for a mid-sized insurance company in Minneapolis called Northfield Group. He was good at his job. Methodical. Reliable. The kind of person whose work required almost no supervision because he had already anticipated the questions before they were asked and built the answers into his reports. He had been at Northfield for 6 years. 4 of those years had been ordinary, a modest apartment 20 minutes from the office, a routine, the quiet and adequate life of a single man who worked hard and kept his world small. Then the divorce. He and his wife, Karen, had been married for 9 years. They had no children. When the marriage ended, it ended in the way that some long marriages do, not in fire, but in the slow recognition that 2 people had grown in directions that no longer matched, and that continuing would cost them both something they couldn't afford to keep paying. The divorce was civil. The financial split was fair. But fair, in James's case, still meant losing the apartment they had shared because it had been in her name, and finding that the rental market in Minneapolis had changed dramatically since he had last looked, and discovering that his savings, depleted by the divorce proceedings, were not enough for last month, and the deposit that every landlord required. He looked for 6 weeks. He applied for 11 apartments. He was turned down by several and couldn't afford the rest. And then it was November, and he had nowhere to go, and he got in his car. The first few nights were the longest of his life. He told himself it was temporary. He had a job. He had income. He just needed a few months to rebuild his savings to a level where he could clear the deposits. This was not a permanent state. This was a logistical problem with a logistical solution. He managed the logistics with precision. He identified a 24-hour gym nearby and got a membership the first week. He mapped out 3 parking structures in different parts of the city that were covered, lit enough to feel safe, and rarely had security checks after midnight. He rotated between them. He did laundry twice a week at a coin laundry on a Thursday evening. He kept a small electric kettle and a bag of instant oatmeal in the back of his car. He found a grocery store with a prepared foods section and ate a real meal every evening before driving to wherever he would sleep that night. He was rigorous about his appearance. This was not vanity. It was armor. The moment anyone at work suspected something was wrong, he would have to answer questions he could not answer without losing the only stable thing left in his life. His job was his address. His job was his identity. His job was the reason none of what had fallen apart was fully visible yet. He protected it with everything he had. The hardest part was not physical. The car was uncomfortable, yes. The winters in Minneapolis were brutal, and there were nights when he ran the engine for 20 minutes to generate heat and then turned it off and buried himself in 2 sleeping bags he had bought at a camping store. There were mornings when he was so stiff he sat in a gas station parking lot for 10 minutes before he could move properly. But the body adapts to discomfort faster than anyone tells you. The hard part was the interior work, the constant management of what he showed and what he hid. He could not accept invitations to dinner parties because he could not reciprocate. He deflected questions about his apartment. I moved to a different area, still getting settled, it's a bit chaotic right now. He never gave anyone his home address. He had a P.O. box that he used for everything that required a mailing address. He became expert at the subject change. At the natural redirect. At making the person across from him feel so heard and engaged that they forgot to ask the follow-up question he was dreading. He had one close call in the first year. A colleague named Sandra mentioned that she drove through a neighborhood and thought she saw his car. He laughed it off, he'd been visiting a friend, and moved the conversation quickly. That night, he sat in his car and shook for 20 minutes. Not from cold. From the nearness of it. The second year was harder than the first. The initial resolve, the firm insistence that this was temporary, had to be renewed daily now, and some days it took more to renew than he had. His savings were growing slowly. Slower than he had projected. The market was still difficult. A string of medical expenses, a dental issue that couldn't be ignored, set him back 3 months. He started doing the math differently. Not when can I get out, but what does it look like if this goes on? He began to see the shape of something he hadn't let himself look at directly, that this had become his life, not a detour from it. He was not a lazy man. He was not an addict. He had no mental health crisis that had brought him here. He was a competent, employed, intelligent person who had fallen through a gap that existed in the city he lived in, a gap between what he earned and what the housing market demanded at a particular moment in his life. He knew other people had fallen through the same gap. He had never, before, understood what that actually felt like from the inside. He understood now. He started noticing other people. At the gym, early in the morning, he sometimes saw men who stayed longer than a workout required, who folded their clothes in a way that suggested they were the only clothes available. He never said anything. But he recognized them. He felt, for the first time, like he was part of a category he had never thought about before. He didn't go to her door. Not for 2 more weeks. But he thought about that 3-second silence constantly. He turned it over and examined it. He had spent 3 years being invisible by choice, and in 45 seconds, a conversation had come closer to the surface than anything in that entire time. It unsettled him. Not because he felt exposed, she hadn't pressed, hadn't guessed. But because he had felt, briefly, the weight of someone's genuine attention. And it had reminded him how much he had been carrying without anyone to help carry it. He started watching Angela. Not suspiciously, professionally. The way she ran the department. The way she addressed the team. She was direct without being cold. She solved problems without making the people who created them feel diminished. He trusted her in the slow, careful way that people trust when trust has become a complicated thing. One Thursday afternoon, he stayed late. The office had mostly cleared. He walked past her open door and she looked up and said, "You're here late." "So are you," he said. She smiled. "True." She gestured at the chair across from her desk. "Sit for a minute." He sat. They talked for a few minutes about nothing important. A report due the following week. A process question. And then, in a pause, James said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," she said. "If someone here were going through something significant, not work-related. Something personal. Something that might affect things. Would you want to know?" Angela put down her pen. She looked at him steadily. "Yes," she said. "I would want to know." He told her. Not everything at once. He started at the practical level, the divorce, the timing, the financial gap, the decision to stay in his car. He spoke in the even, measured way he had learned to speak about things that required composure to discuss. Angela listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, the office was very quiet. The last of the evening light was coming through the window at a low angle. "How long?" she asked. 3 years in November, he said. She was still for a moment. Then she said, "You've been coming in here every day, doing excellent work, and managing all of this." "Yes." "And you didn't tell anyone?" "No." "Why are you telling me now?" He thought about it honestly. "Because I'm tired," he said. "Not of the work. Of holding the rest of it alone. And because you asked me how I was doing in a way that suggested you actually wanted to know." Angela looked at her desk for a moment. Then she looked at him. "I'm glad you told me," she said. "And I'm going to help you. Not in a way that makes things complicated at work, I want to be clear about that. But there are resources and I know some people. We're going to fix the practical problem. Is that okay?" James looked at this woman he had known for less than 2 months. "Yes," he said. His voice was very even. "That's okay." He got to his car that night and sat in the silence of the parking structure and pressed his forehead against the steering wheel. He had told someone. And the sky had not fallen. He told his coworkers gradually, not all at once, not dramatically. He told a few of the people he was closest to, in individual conversations, quietly and plainly. The reactions were consistent. Shock, first. Then something softer. Then the same question, in different words, "Why didn't you tell us?" He always gave the same answer. "Because I was afraid of becoming the thing that had happened to me. I needed to still be James. Just James. The person who does the work and shows up and is okay." Most people understood that. Some needed more time with it. His colleague Sandra, the one who had seen his car in that neighborhood 2 years earlier, sat with him at lunch one afternoon and was quiet for a long time. "I thought something was off," she said finally. "I noticed a few things over the years. I told myself I was imagining it." "You weren't," James said. "I should have asked." "Maybe," he said. "But I would have deflected. I was very good at deflecting." She looked at him. "Are you okay now?" "I'm getting there," he said. "I have a door I can close. That's more than I had 6 months ago." The following year, James gave a talk, voluntarily, nervously, at a company all-hands meeting where Northfield had invited staff to share personal stories as part of a mental health awareness initiative. He stood at the front of the room and told them the 3-year version in 8 minutes. The room was completely silent throughout. Afterward, a young man from the accounting team came up to him. He was about 25, with an expression that carried more weight than his age explained. "Can I talk to you sometime?" the young man said quietly. "Not publicly. Just, I think I might be going through something similar." James looked at him. "Yes," he said. "Of course." He took out his phone. "Let me give you my number." His number. His real number. Connected to a plan that billed to an address, a real one, with a door he could close. He had spent 3 years becoming invisible. Now he was choosing, carefully and deliberately, to be seen. Not because the world had become safe. Not because the gap that had swallowed him had closed. But because he knew now what it felt like to drown quietly while people walked past. And he was not willing to walk past anymore.